Chapter 2. It was just before the movie started that night that Sean felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. He chose to ignore it, but he knew that it was definitely a text from one of two people. And unfortunately, it was all he could think about during the movie that night. Sean usually held the popcorn when they went to the movie theater, but that night Naomi volunteered for the task. Perhaps she thought it was just a small way to relieve some pressure from the drama he had to endure earlier that night. It was the small things like this that Sean had really liked about Naomi, even before they had officially started dating, back when it was just her hanging out with him and his friends. Have fun fishing. The text contained only those 3 words. On their way home after the movie, Sean's eyes scanned it over and over again. Every now and then, the screen on his phone would go dark and he would look away for a moment. After a few seconds, though, Naomi would notice the screen go bright again as Sean looked back down at the message. She didn't know what it said, but Sean's stone-cold expression was telling. It was from Trey, and its meaning was obvious. This would be the first time ever that it wasn't going to be the 3 of them going on the fishing trip. In a small way, Sean was relieved, but now that it was going to be only he and his dad, a strange sort of loneliness began to sink in. Sean knew that his brother had been biased towards his mom since the divorce, but since it was going to be both he and his brother going on the trip, it gave Sean the feeling that he wasn't the only one trying to mend his broken family. He also knew that there was no way he would be able to change Trey's mind, so what was the point in even trying? Sure thing. Sean responded quickly, making sure not to prod at his brother's terse statement. He glanced over at Naomi in the driver's seat of the old Honda, only for a moment though, so she couldn't see him. He wanted to make sure she couldn't see who he was texting. He didn't want her to ask any questions. He was certain that she didn't want to deal with the situation any more than he did. He, unfortunately, had the dumb luck of being related to the 2 most stubborn, proud people on the planet. The crackling, popcorn sound of gravel started as Naomi pulled into his dad's driveway once more that night. Sean could see the lights were on in the house, and through the living room curtains the light blue glow of his dad's 55-inch TV. He could also see the muddy tire tracks through the grass from where Trey's car had been parked before. Looks like it's over, Naomi said as she pulled to a stop. Looks like it, Sean said quietly, pulling at the door handle. If you need anything, let me know, she said as he exited the car. The statement caught him by surprise. He didn't understand why she wanted to be involved in this mess. There was a moment of awkward silence where he just wasn't sure what to say. He wanted to tell her, just leave. You don't know what you're asking. Instead, though, he smiled. Yup, he said. See ya. He thought about going inside to see if his dad wanted to talk about anything, but he knew the conversation would be the same as it always was. Your brother doesn't get it, not like you, he would say, sticking one hand in front of him and waving it. He doesn't know your mom like I do. Sean had heard it all before, and he would normally tolerate the things his father would say about his mom after that. But now he felt tired. Not only tired of the same narcissistic talk he would have with his dad, but tired physically. He felt drained from the drama. So, tonight there would be no talk where he would pretend to agree with whatever his dad said so as not to offend him. Pretend to agree just to help him believe that at least one of his kids is still on his side. Tonight, Sean would get in his car, start it, and try to pull out of the driveway as fast as possible, before his dad could see him. Sean turned the key and quietly started driving. When he pulled out onto the main road, however, he glanced back at the house in his side mirror and could see the black silhouette of his father looking out the kitchen window as his car pulled away. Sean was living with some old friends in a rental house on the west side of Gilson. During the summer, his friends would all go to live with their parents, so he had the house to himself. They all attended the same college, only a few blocks down from the house, and seemed to enjoy it. Sean, on the other hand, had never really liked school, and found work as a laborer at his uncle's construction company a little more his speed. He would have gone to live at home during the summer too, if he still had a home to go to. His dad's house was closer to the shop, but if he lived there he would go crazy. His mom's house was also a little closer to his work, but he couldn't live there right now. He just couldn't. The rental house was always quiet these days, with Sean being the only one there. He spent most of his time watching stupid internet videos on the living room TV they had hooked up to his laptop. Two of his roommates were much more technologically savvy than Sean, and because of this they never struggled with slow internet, and their house seemed to be the most advanced one on the street once you stepped inside. His roommates even had the living room lights hooked up to where they could turn them on with their phones if they wanted. That night, Sean decided he was too full from movie theater popcorn to mess with a dinner of any sort, so he just decided to watch a variety of YouTube videos until he fell asleep. When he got online, though, he saw the same story popping up everywhere. It was the story that was on the news at Bass Pro. There were even videos posted by people who had been infected by the illness. Then there were videos posted by your everyday conspiracy nut who believed that every new plague was created by the government. Usually, this was followed by some kind of rant about how the earth is flat or how the lizard people are secretly in charge of everything. Sean had a close friend like this, and he found it somewhat entertaining to get him going on crap like that sometimes. After binge-watching way too many videos, Sean realized that if he went to sleep right then, he could get a solid 4 hours before he had to get up for work. That night, however, he wouldn't even get that many. The dream started out innocent enough. Sean was sitting in his bedroom in their old house looking out the window. It was a warm, beautiful summer day. The green of the trees reflected yellow shimmers of light from where the sunbeams touched them. There was still some morning dew shimmering on the windowsill. Sean stood up and walked down the stairs to the main floor. His whole family was down there, talking and carrying on. Sean could hear the sound of laughter coming from the living room, a sound he had not heard in a long time, it seemed, and a small smile crossed his face as he approached them. His mom and dad sat together on the couch, with Trey sitting in a chair across from them, telling a funny story from work, probably. Sean's older sister, Courtney, and her husband, Ben, both sat on the love seat to the left of the couch. Everything was just like it used to be. The old house that Sean had grown up in looked like it was brand new. Sean looked out the window towards the lake. The sky was perfectly clear, reflecting its sapphire blue color off the calm surface of the water. Sean could see the neighbor's house through the thick green of the trees, but no one was outside. He sat on the floor next to the window and tried to hold it back, but eventually his eyes began to glaze over with joyful tears. It was like the life he had been living was all just a bad dream, and he had finally woken up. It was after a few moments of joy that Sean had not felt in several years, that he noticed the slight dimming of the light from the window. When he looked outside, the peaceful view had begun to warp into something more sinister. Thick gray clouds began to invade the blue sky, and strangely, the water in the lake began to rise. Sean stared out in confusion as he watched the water drown some of the trees below. He turned to warn everyone, but when he looked back, they all just stood still, staring back at him with a look of disdain. Sean looked to his father and gasped. His face was gone. It was almost like he couldn't remember what Sam's face looked like, so his brain didn't know how to construct it. Lightning suddenly flashed through the skylight in the ceiling above the living room, and Sean jumped as it was followed by a roar of thunder. It was then that he began to hear a quiet creaking noise, like the sound a house makes at night when it is settling. The lake was now at the bottom of the living room windows and still rising. Sean grabbed his mom's sleeve and headed towards the stairs. The family followed them all the way up until they had gone into Sean's bedroom. He knew he could get onto the roof from his window, and so he began pulling all of them out onto the roof one by one. By the time he got Ben out, the water was touching the heel of Sean's left shoe. They climbed higher and higher onto the roof until they were just over the skylight. Sean looked out into the vastness of the blackened water. It seemed to go on forever. It's like a black hole, Sean thought as he stood on his old roof, frozen in terror. Thunder shook the atmosphere, and huge waves began to form, crashing onto the roof and the sides of the house. As Sean turned and stared at his family, realizing their helplessness, he noticed something else as well. His dad was not with them. Sean began to search frantically, calling to him from the roof, but there was no sign of him. Sean then heard a sound from the skylight behind him. It started loudly, then got steadily quieter. He walked closer to the square of glass sticking through the shingles of the roof. It was the sound of something knocking on the window from below. Somebody was trapped inside. Sean leaned down by the skylight and peered at the face of his father, who was now surrounded by the water that had pushed him up into the glass. He stared helplessly as his dad knocked on the glass, moving his fist as fast as he could through the thick wall of water that was killing him. "Somebody help!" Sean screamed, but the cry was swept away in the wind. He beat on the glass with his shoe until his foot was sore. Then he yelled for help once more, but nobody else moved. Sean's entire family just stood on the rooftop, staring at him as his father drowned. Finally, he got on his knees and began to smack the glass of the skylight with the palms of his hands, until it finally began to crack. But then he noticed that his dad had stopped beating on the skylight. He watched as his father placed both hands on the clear pane of glass. Sean beat on it as hard as he could, when suddenly his father's open palms began to bleed. Sean stopped hitting the window and watched the blood flow and mix with the water, staining it until there was nothing but a dark crimson beneath the glass. Then he watched as his father took his hands off the skylight and drifted downward into the red abyss of the floodwaters, until he had disappeared from Sean's sight completely. At that moment, Sean awoke. The dream had left a lasting feeling deep inside of him, and he decided to stay awake for the remainder of the night. He went down to the kitchen for a glass of water because his throat felt so dry. Had he been screaming in his sleep? The dream felt so real, so he might have been. Good thing his roommates were gone. The memory of this nightmare would constantly plague Sean, though, in the coming weeks, and he would be reminded of it as his mind drifted from time to time. One does not easily forget such an experience, especially not when it seemed so real. Sean shuddered slightly in the outfitter's office as he recalled the dream once more. He then looked over at his dad, who had now moved on to asking fishing questions that he probably already knew the answer to. Sean scratched at the bug bite once more, again awakening the burning sensation that he hated so much. Finally, Sam stood up, which meant they were ready to be on their way. "You ready?" his dad asked him, tucking the back of his brown Eli, Minnesota t-shirt into his pants. "I think I'm gonna run up to the gas station next door and grab a soda quick," Sean said, standing up also. His dad looked at him with the "you should have done that already" look. It was another of his looks that Sean was now used to. "I need some caffeine," Sean said. "I'm pretty snarfed." Sam's eyebrows raised slightly, indicating that he didn't know what that word meant, but was now trying to figure it out by process of elimination. Asking questions, after all, is a sign of vulnerability. He needs caffeine. That means he's tired. Therefore, snarfed equals tired. It was only a stupid-sounding word that probably only Sean and his friends used. It was often followed by a laugh from someone in that group simply because the word just sounded ridiculous. But Sean immediately regretted using it now in front of the old man. "Yeah, all right," Sam said. "Try to hurry. All they have to do is load up the canoe, then we'll be on our way." Sean walked towards the door as Sam turned to talk to the older man behind the counter. He could barely hear the start of the conversation as he made his way quickly towards the exit. "Hey man, you doing all right? You're looking a little paler than you did last year." "Good memory," the old man behind the counter replied. "Yeah, I think I caught a bug or something." "Really?" Sam said with an overly surprised voice. "You better get yourself checked out if you've been watching the news lately." Both men chuckled loudly in the same sort of backcountry redneck way. Sean shut the door behind him as he stepped out into the early morning air. He liked Eli. It was a nice, small town, and the northern air was always crisp and cool. He sometimes thought that if he ever got married or anything like that, he might even try to move there. Now, though, that thought was more of a fantasy than anything else. He thought about Naomi and how she had expressed interest in going on the trip with them sometimes. But Sean knew it could never have happened, even before the breakup. As Sean walked the 50 or so feet to the gas station, he could remember all the years he and Trey had gone to the same exact gas station before. They would get snacks or sodas for the long drive to the lake from the outfitters. He wondered if the cashier would be surprised that it was just him this year. When he walked in, though, he saw a new cashier he didn't recognize. It was a blonde girl that looked just a little younger than him. She smiled at him as he walked in, and he noticed that she brushed her hair back over her left ear, the same way Naomi used to. Why did she have to have her hair like that, though? Why did everything lately remind him of the girl he had once loved? Sean figured it was just a coincidence. Lots of girls did that. Still, though, he hated being reminded of Naomi, especially so soon after things had gone south between them. He didn't want to think about her at all, and yet, at every turn it seemed, he would see something that brought her back to his attention. "Stop it," he thought. "Just stop. It's over. You just need to stop thinking about her is all." Sean smiled politely back at the cashier and abruptly turned to try and find the fridge where the Mountain Dew was hiding. "Can I help you find anything?" she called over the counter to him as she played with a long strand of her hair that just happened to be combed over her left ear. "Just looking for the dew," he said back. The amount of discomfort in his voice surprised even him. "The dew? Who calls it that?" She mumbled as she walked around the counter. "I think it's down here somewhere." Perfect. Sean hated it when cashiers became too involved in what you were looking for, especially if you didn't actually ask for help finding it, It was a rare occurrence back home in Illinois, but people up north seemed more cheerful somehow, almost in an annoying way. Too eager to help. He knew he was being weird about it, though. It was just a pet peeve. He spotted the bright neon green glow of the elusive Mountain Dew fridge before she did, but he felt obligated to follow her now that she had volunteered herself to the search party. "Here it is," she said, pointing to the door of the fridge. "I knew he had it." "Thanks," he mumbled. But she didn't walk away yet. Was she really going to stand there while he made his selection? Relief came to him in the form of the outfitter's big white van honking the horn. He could see his dad through the window of the store, sitting in the passenger seat looking in at him. "What's this guy's problem?" the cashier asked, finally walking back behind the counter. "It's my dad," Sean said. "We're about to head into the Boundary Waters." "Oh, fun," she said as she scanned the barcode on the bottle. "What are you guys going to do?" "Just some fishing." He didn't want to get into it. One time he and Trey brought up fishing to a cashier while they were checking out, and it happened to be some vegetarian animal rights girl. Sean was all for ending animal cruelty, or whatever the heck those people were all about, but some folks just took it way too personally in his opinion. She started to give them a brief lecture on why she didn't believe in fishing, but only got a few words in before Trey rolled his eyes at Sean, who made the mistake of laughing a little. To Sean's dismay, she saw the eye roll and immediately ended her sentence with an abrupt, "Is that it?" As Sean walked out the door, he caught a glimpse of the small TV the girl was watching behind the register. It was another news story. Something about sick people somewhere in California. They really were trying to milk this thing, weren't they? Sean let the door close behind him and thought about how the media is always coming up with some sort of crazy illness to make the populace go nuts. That was one thing his dad was definitely right about, or so Sean felt. Sam never watched the news. He always said it was 90% bullcrap blown up from a 10% truth. Sam said that it was a classic case of boy crying wolf. They always had such an agenda of creating panic that eventually everyone would just become calloused to it. Sure, sometimes it really was something serious, hence the 10% truth Sam had talked about. However, when you've cried wolf 100 times, on the 101st time the people aren't likely to believe you. And on that time, something really horrible could be happening for real, but no one would be listening.